a positional group like the tight end group. This is the draft class to do it. It is very deep.
I'm with Green Bean. I mean, to me, the tight ends that you want to have on a team, it's always nice if you can get the guy that does it all.
I think it's going to be a functional part of the offense. You better get somebody in there that can play, or get a couple guys that do something, extraordinarily well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dom C here with the Talking Jets Network. I'm lucky enough to grab tight end from Georgia Tech, Jackson Hollis. Jackson, how's it feel to be back on the field, my brother?
It's great, man. You know, right when we were getting on that bus, I was just excited.
And that's Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. Now, he didn't say anything. He continued and did all the drills on an ankle. Another guy with under a 4% drop rate throughout his collegiate career.
Jets Network were able to get a hold of Terrence Ferguson, tight end, Oregon. Dude, great practice so far. How's it feel to be back on the field?
Oh, man, it feels good to be out here. I love competing. There's a lot of great players out here, so go against
Meet our friend Harold Fannin.
See, here with the Talking Jets Network, lucky to grab Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr. Harold,
former college quarterback. He's thrown, he's got touchdown passes in his career. He matches movements, and he matches, he's got quick feet. Like I said, he's another guy who's got a nose for the ball, turns the ball over all the time. Again, another smooth mover, clicks and closes.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Dom C from Talking Jets, from Green Bean, Jets fan, and now from Jets Chaos and from Prospect Project with Dom C.
Project Prospect, you said.
Project. He does everything. He does everything, which is why it's impossible to expect me to say it all right. Dom C, how you doing on this very fine Sunday evening?
I'm good, man. I'm good. A lot of news happening in Jets world, man. We're moving and shaking, baby.
Big news today. I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but it's impossible not to mention the Jets just re-upped or re-signed Jamion Sherwood, our signal calling linebacker, which definitely takes at least one need, out of the draft. I mean, not that means we will not draft a linebacker. I'm not saying that, but it's certainly, if we lost him, we definitely would have needed a linebacker or a free agent one. And the free agent market at linebacker doesn't look too good. So I think that we definitely have a little bit more breathing room when it comes to linebacker by bringing Sherwood back.
Yeah, I would say so. Curious to see how or if at all it affects the status of Quincy Williams, right? Quincy signed what he did 6 years, 3 years, 21 million or something like that. 3 years, 18 million. He's completely outplayed his contract. So does he hold out? Do the Jets re-sign him and extend him? Or do they just let it go and then, look to replace him next year? Who knows?
Yeah, well, hopefully he handles it professionally. It doesn't hold out. We have some priorities first. It would be nice to reward him, but we do have some other things we have to think about. So right now might not be the best time for him to start chirping, but he hasn't yet. So let's hope that it's handled in a good way and not a way that already creates bad press.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah. So Sean McAteers, what we are here to do is we are here to look at and to hear your top 10 for the 2025 draft class defensive tackle. And I know I've not shut up about it since the Senior Bowl about how many great prospects there are and what a deep position. And because there are so many, we're going back to doing a top 10 because there are just too many to only do a top 8.
Correct. Yeah. And listen, I personally have 17 guys graded with a 4th round grade or higher. And that's a lot. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I get that. Yeah. That's an absolute, bevy of riches, if you will. If you're in the need for interior defensive tackles, and these are guys that not only are, your big fatty, nose tackle type run stuff in 1 techs, but your 3 techs, and even the guys that'll play, some 5 tech or some defensive end in non-man front, which is, those tweener guys. You get your pick of the litter. You can have whatever your flavor is. I think there'll be enough there for for you to go get. So it's a good class to need a defensive tackle. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching some film before. I'm not going to say who. When we get up to them, I've watched a few of these guys. There was one that I didn't spend enough time on, and I saw where you had him ranked and said I better brush up on him a little bit. This is an exciting class. We're definitely, without question, and you don't have to go in the first round to do it, going to get a day one contributor at this position.
Yeah.
It's easy as pie to do. It would be an absolute, even if we sign, the DT from Detroit that, Glenn probably loves, a veteran guy, it would be absolutely shocking if we didn't take a defensive tackle somewhere in this draft, because there's just, when has there been a better opportunity to get someone at that position that's going to contribute right away?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong with that, Jeremy. Not wrong at all.
So, right before we get started, let me say hello to a few people.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Sean McAteer is here, great supporter of the channel. Our friend Dano is here from Danger Zone, unbelievable. Another great guy from Jets Worldwide, Johnny Boy. It's great to see him here. Awesome supporter forever. Love you guys. Glad to see you here, and excited that you're here early and ready to go, because we're going to get started now, and we're going to start with some honorable mentions. I know that you have a few of those, and then we'll get started and counting down at number 10.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. Boom, let me close.
Ooh, he just completely shut himself out. He closed the whole window, which means I gotta kind of shoot the crap and talk about defensive tackle and what I like about the position. Some people say big fatty, but what's interesting about the defensive tackle position is sometimes it's a big fatty, sometimes it's an athlete, someone strong and lean and mean and fast and quick. Sometimes it's an undersized guy that really knows how to get leverage, and we're going to be talking about one of those pretty soon. So lots of different types of builds and guys and athletes that make up the defensive tackle position. And Tom,
sorry, I closed out the window accidentally. I was trying to get rid of some of this junk in my background, and I closed the window out accidentally. So my bad. Let's start with the honorable mentions, right?
Right.
There's a couple guys that I have a little bit further down. Both of these actually, two guys that I want to talk about that I think need to be talked about. If you're a Jets fan, one of them very well, because he seems to have become one of these folklore Jet favorites. And another guy is not talked about in the same light, but I think has a lot of the same traits and abilities, and that's Jamari Caldwell from Oregon and CJ West from Indiana. Both of those guys, run stuffing type, one tech defensive tackles, two gappers, both big bodies. Jamari Caldwell is a lot bigger body at 344 pounds, but West can hold his own. He's about 327, a little bit shorter. West really flies under the radar, played in Indiana, and doesn't get a lot of the same respect and hoopla that some of these other three techs get. But man, for a guy who's kind of small and stocky, he really anchors down and can hold his ground very well. He's got really good movement skills. Again, wins the leverage battle. I love the hands, and Caldwell's the same thing. Caldwell does a lot of the same thing. For a guy who's 344 pounds, you would think he's he's not Vita Vea. He's not like your real true grind it run stuffing defensive tackle. He's good. I'm not saying he's bad, but he does get moved off the ball a little too much. I think he can play a little too high. But man, for a guy that big, 344 pounds, the way he moves and the way he can get at the passer too, he gives you a little bit of juice from the pass rush. Although I think his role will be limited in terms of passing downs to start his NFL career. I think there's something to work with. Another couple guys I want to quickly mention. a big riser at the Senior Bowl, big riser after the combine in, a name that not a lot of people are talking about. That's Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. 6'6" and 6'6" and a half, 300 and just about 300 pounds. I think he weighed in at the combine a little less because he probably wanted to run a little faster, and he did. Really agile, moves real well, good first step. The type of defensive tackle that when you think of the Jets' old scheme, where they want their defensive tackles really pressing forward and getting, playing one gap and getting at the passer, that's the kind of guy Ty Robinson can do. Also, Omar Norman Lott, who has kind of lost a little juice. As a matter of fact, and again, I've heard some grumblings, in and around that, he could see himself drop pretty far. I don't know if there's a medical. I know that there was a knee issue, so I don't know how that medical checked out. And then, a lot of people wonder if he can be anything more than just a sub package defensive tackle. He didn't do it a lot in college. I mean, he barely played snaps, but the ones that he played, limited role, the ones that he played, he was very effective at getting the passer. And one more name as an honorable mention that I want to mention, and this is a guy, if you watch Connor Rogers and Trevor Sikkema, they talk about him a lot. They happen to be very, very high on him, and that's Jordan Birch out of Oregon, another Oregon guy. There's, 3 Oregon guys on this defensive line that are just spectacular, and Jordan Birch is one of them. 6'5", 295. I like him to be more of that, 5 tech, that defensive end in a 3-4 front than I do a true, even front defensive tackle, but I think he can do both. He is the guy that's in the mold of JFM, right? He's going to be super sturdy against the run, big, strong, physical edge setter that can, might not have like the super high elite bend or quickness or pass rush bag that some of these other guys have, but will get those ancillary sacks. You know what I mean? Those, when those coverage sacks, and he's just a nonstop motor and keeps working his way to the quarterback. So I think he's much more of a run stopper first, which is not bad. There's plenty of times for those.
Right. Especially when, because people forget, you rotate. You have more than 2 guys that just play every rep. And we have, an LT3, someone as an undrafted free agent in just 1 year who's going to continue to develop a pretty good pass, a defensive tackle specialist against the pass. Like he actually did really well in passing situations. So, if you get a guy who's really good in running situations, and those 2 are just guys who rotate around and you use them in the right situations, I mean, that make your team really good.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love the guys from Oregon. People forget, man, we got a great team out here. These guys are, they're
that defense was that. Listen, you're gonna not only did we mentioned 2 guys from Oregon already. We're gonna mention a third on the defensive line.
Absolutely.
There's also going to be a linebacker that's going to be very high on my board. There's going to be a cornerback that's relatively high. I don't know if he's top 10. Depending on, we did the cornerbacks already. So yeah, Jabbar Muhammad, who was a slot guy, he landed 14 for me.
Yeah.
So they had a really good defense.
Yeah. And then we haven't even started on the offensive tackles yet and what they got going there.
Yeah,
so.
The running backs or the wide receivers, or hey, Oregon's a good team. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
So that brings us to number 10. We're going to start the countdown at number 10. This is a guy I just want to say that I love. I love this guy. I love watching him play. He does have some obvious concerns that you'll talk about, that are very glaring, but he doesn't seem to think it's a problem. So I'll let you take care of the rest and introduce this guy.
Yeah, number 10 on my list. And I've gone back and forth. He was higher at one point. Not much. I mean, in that same tier, but I think I had him as high as like 8, and I've had him as low as like 11, but I think I've kind of settled into this area for him. And that's out of Virginia Tech, Aeneas Peebles. Listen, you talk about a guy that, I mean, first off, we talked to him in Mobile. He's charming. He's very personable. Really, really nice guy. You could tell he's confident, but not cocky. Like, head on his shoulders kind of Good head on his shoulders kind of kid. Listen, people are going to look at him and be like, he can't play in the NFL. He's barely pushing 6'1". He's listed at 6'1". I don't really think he's 6'1", to be honest with you. I mean, he might even be shorter, and he's about 290 pounds. So he's not going to be every defensive scheme's cup of tea. But man, when you talk about high motor and technician, that's what you're going to get in Peebles. He's got a variety. You talk about a pass rush bag. He's got a variety of it, and he's able to show. He's able to showcase it all. He'll set you up and counter off of the way he sets up. He's really, really active. He's very quick, short. Lateral quickness. He's got that good get off. He plays with really active and violent hands. And what you like to see in a guy like that is how well, at 6'1", 290 pounds, he gets to the quarterback. He had almost a 22% pass rush win rate last year in college. We talk about the leverage. We talk about the leverage game. He wins it. And it's funny in the interview down in Mobile, when I asked him that, I said, "Hey, listen," I said, "Aeneas," I said, I'm sure you've heard it all your life and all your career, and I'm sure you're going to hear it moving forward. You're dwarfed compared to some of these big linemen, 6'6", 6'7", 350 pounds. You're almost 6'1". He's like, hey, they got to come down to my level if they want to win. That's exactly what he said. Yeah. They got to come down to my level. And he he fires out low. He plays with that low center of gravity. He wins the leverage battle. And for a guy that's small, he does really good. He really succeeds with the power aspect of his game. Like I said, he's got strong hands and he knows how to use them. He sets everything up so well. He's a twitched up athlete. Listen, he's not going to, he's going to get blown out of a couple plays, and the film does show that. Call it what it is. There's a lot of times where he's washed out by bigger linemen on down blocks, double teams. He doesn't really hold his ground very well. But that's not what his game is, and that's not what he's going to be asked to do. You're not going to line him up there in the middle of the line at 1 tech, 3 tech, anything like that, and ask him to 2 gap or anything like that. You're going to put him in the game, again, referring this, kind of bringing this back to Jets centric. You're going to put him in the game just like they did with Leonard Taylor, right? Where it's, down and distance is long yardage. A pass is coming, 3rd down. You want somebody to pin his ears back and get at the quarterback from the inside. You want him to do it from a 3 tech. Like he identified his one of his favorite players in the NFL is Calijah Kancey, who is built just like him. Maybe a little bit heavier, but not much, but built just like him. And Calijah Kancey has been able to carve out a really good role for himself down there in Tampa Bay. And I think Aeneas Peebles has a chance to have that same type of impact on an NFL team. I got a late day 3, a late day 2, early day 3 grade on him, late 3rd, early 4th. I think he's got the skill set to easily go in the 3rd round. It's just a matter of a team wants or is looking for that specific guy. We saw it last year with the kid from Florida State that went really early to the Rams. They traded up to get him. I can't remember his name. It's good Lord. Defensive tackle went in the 2nd round of the Rams. Somebody will know it. The white kid from Florida State. Yeah. And they said the same thing with him. Like, he's not going to be for everyone. But he was for the Rams and he had a great season. So I think Aeneas Peebles he's going to play a long time in the NFL. He's a little bit older. He's already 24. He'll be 25 once the season starts. So maybe the ceiling on his his athleticism and stuff kind of caps out. But again, I think you get a guy who can come in and at worst going to get at the passer.
Yeah. Could be a role player, and like you said, you don't know. He could be a guy that surprises and goes mid-third round, and like, wow, he went higher than we thought he was going to go, or he could be fifth round because everyone's running away from him because of his size, or just because it's such a deep draft in the position. So you don't know where he's going to go. I remember you when he made that player comp to himself in size, and I thought it was funny because you had said it to me 10 minutes before we interviewed him. So it was really funny that he had brought up Clancy. So that was really cool. I like him. I'm rooting for him. I could definitely see us maybe not taking him as our primary pick, but I could see him. I could see maybe if we signed somebody and then took him, or if we drafted early and then went back and took two, wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world, especially if we don't sign a defensive tackle. Expect us to draft two. So it would make sense.
Yeah, I agree.
So that is your number 10, and now everybody's waiting for. And you could see we're already talking about a guy who can potentially get drafted in the third round at number 10. So it's only going to get better. Who's our number 9?
Number 9, again, another one of the guys that I absolutely love talking to down there, man. He was just like a real personable guy, and he's got a good story, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in depth, and especially the conversation you and I had with him, Jeremy. And that's Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. You talk about big, heavy-handed type defenders, and that's Farmer, just under 6'4", 318 pounds. Again, another guy who just plays strong. He finds ways. He's not the biggest guy, not to say he's small at 6'4", 314. That's probably average size, maybe a little tick under average for defensive tackles in terms of his overall mass, but he finds a way to consistently neutralize double teams as they're coming to him, whether he gets skinny and slips through them, whether he uses his speed to get around the edge of one, whether he goes right through the chest of one guy. He does a really I thought a really good job at it. He plays sudden, good burst. Like I talked about, powerful hands. Like, he's got cement bricks on his hands, and he was a guy that really stood out to me, not only in his film, but when you watch him live, there wasn't a lot of reps that he looked bad. I'm not going to say that he won every single rep, but there wasn't a lot of reps where he looked bad. So that's Josh Farmer, and the beautiful thing about him, and when we talked to him, and he was the first interview that we did down there. I thought it was interesting. Like, after I introduced myself and told him, did content for Talking Jets and so forth. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, you guys got to come get me, man. He's like, I need to be up there. I need to be up there playing next to my boy Jermaine again. He's like, I'll tell you the truth. He said, I'm happy to go to whatever team drafts me. He's like, but I really want to play for the Jets. And I was like, sold. Cool. Yeah. I said, I'm sold, man.
Yeah. It's there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it when someone, and we had someone like that last year too. It's nothing like it when someone specifically says to you that they want to play for the Jets, they want to play for your team. And who was it they wanted to play with last year? Somebody said, well, I want to go to the Jets because I want to play alongside. And we were like, oh yeah, that's right, you played with him. And I can't believe I can't remember it.
It was Braden Fisk. That's who the guy from the Rams I was talking about.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, he's like, you got my boy up there, Zaire Barnes. He was my college roommate for 3 years.
Yeah. It never hurts. So Joshua Farmer, would be really fun. Would be a really fun guy. Would be another guy. What round do you think?
So I think he's going to go a lot earlier than expected. Like, he could, if he went off the board in the second round, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever.
Wow. Yeah. We're up to number 9, and we're talking about a guy who can go in the second round.
Now, again, he's got a late third, early fourth round grade from me. Very similar to where Peebles was. But there's a lot of buzz around Farmer. Like I said, I think his skill set is one that's unique. And he prototypical. I don't think he's scheme dependent. Like, he could play 3 tech. You can have him play inside at times, although you wouldn't want him as your regular 1 tech, but he can do that at times. If you played an odd man front, he could easily play out on the 3, and I think he's going to give you, above average run defense with juiced up with a juiced up pass rush from there as well. Now, Combine didn't do him any favors. He was a little bit slower and a little bit less athletic than his film shows because, man, he's on fire. When he just looks like he knows the snap count every time that ball, every play that you watch him. He looks like he's getting the best jump in the world. And he scored a fat guy touchdown too. Picked off a screen pass and ran it back for like 55 yards. You got to love that, man.
And then you get a fat guy spike.
Yeah, exactly. I think he did the he did the Dougie. So yeah, he's a guy that I think could fit in this scheme. I think he could be I would love to see him as a Jet, but he's a guy that I think I could fit in this scheme, if nothing more, as that rotational piece behind Quinnen Williams. Right? Now I don't know if you spend the second round on a rotational piece behind Quinnen Williams, but that's where I think he would slide in. I think in the Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes defense, he's probably the same position as Quinnen, which kind of hurts his chances a little bit. But you get him and you just let him ball out.
So. Yep. It's amazingly enough, we are already up to number 8.
Yes,
on the list. Because we're already talking about guys, like you might have to pick them in the second round if you want them, but yet we're only up to number 8. This is such a deep draft, this position. This was a guy that we together have never spoke about.
Correct.
I never really asked you about him. He's one of the guys where I started watching a little bit of film on him. I didn't get to watch as much as I wanted to. Sometimes I get interrupted and, my ADHD kicks in. Yeah. But I was watching him. I'm interested in what you're going to say about him. I can't wait to hear it. But I love that he's in the top 10 because I definitely like what I was seeing. Like there were some things that really look good. And I'm not going to say it because I want to hear what you say it. And I want to see if it matches what where my brain is. But go ahead with number 8.
Number 8 out of South Carolina is TJ Sanders. 6'4", 290, maybe 290. He's a little bit undersized. That's the truth for him is he's a little bit undersized. He lacks the explosiveness off the ball that the other guys that we talked about in Aeneas Pables and Josh Farmer have. He definitely doesn't have that type of get off. That first step is a little bit, but man, when you talk about a guy who is as strong as an ox, right? He can just run through the chest of an offensive lineman, and it doesn't matter if the offensive lineman weighs 100 pounds more than him. There's not a lot of guys who can win on sheer power from the interior, like TJ Sanders can. The bull rush is legit. The bull rush is absolutely legit. Now, they played him a little bit. South Carolina played him a little bit all over the place. He played a lot of 4-eye, played a lot of odd man 5 tech. But to me, I think he is a true 3 tech in a 4-man front. I think that's where his home will be. And I think he'll do a really, really good job. Like I said, the play strength is through the roof. The movement skills, although the first step isn't elite, but the way that he moves laterally, the way that he can press the pocket vertically, the nonstop motor, all those stuff are traits that the NFL teams are just going to fall in love with.
All I thought was when I was watching him, the thing that went through my head was just whoever has to guard him I thought to myself, that's a stressful guy to play against. Yeah. Like if you get caught off balance, you're going to look stupid. He's going to knock you on your ass and run over you. That's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, you have to focus every snap and get into position because if you're not ready, I would think I would have a lot of anxiety going up against a guy like this because that's what I saw. I saw a guy that was it was like ringing the bell and letting the bull out. That's what this guy is.
Yeah, that's the truth. He is so strong and he plays it and like I said, he's a little bit undersized, a little bit thin, but man, the power profile that comes with TJ Sanders and those hands and those nonstop churning legs that he plays with to just run through people is is unbelievable. So he's going to play a long time. I got a 3rd round grade on him, and I expect him that's where he's going to go. Could he slip into the 2nd? Yes, but again, I'd say in any other league or any other year, he's probably a sure lock for top 60 pick. But this is just a really deep defensive line class. So.
Yeah. There's gonna, I think in 5 years from now, there's gonna be a lot of really good defensive tackles in the NFL. When you look at the top 15, there's gonna be a handful of them from this freaking draft class. So
yeah,
it's pretty impressive. So that's TJ Sanders from South Carolina.
Yep.
We are gonna move on to number 7. Oh man, the names are getting richer as we go because this is a pretty rich name.
Yeah, and I think I'm a little bit lower on this player. More so than a lot. Like I've heard a lot of buzz on this guy that he could have some first round. Some teams looking for him in the first round. And that's TJ Sanders, Alfred Collins out of Texas. You talk about big mountain of a man, 6'5", 330. He's your one tech. He's your run stuffer, right? Again. He's got alignment versatility, although I think that he's probably going to settle as as kind of that, that one tech or that zero tech in out front. He did a lot of things. He played a lot of 3 tech in Texas, where he was just a better athlete than a lot of these guys. And he's not even that great. He's not an elite athlete, but in college football game, he was one of the best on the field every time he stepped on. For a big man, he's got a little juice, man. He's got some shimmy. As a pass rusher, he can, he's got some good burst. He can, kind of set up, kind of does those little shakes and uses his head and his shoulders to set up defenders. Swipes the hands away and gets vertical. You'll love that, but his real moneymaker is the stout run defense that he plays. He's hard to move once he anchors down. He's tall, so he can lose that leverage battle. I think that's going to be a challenge for him at the next level. For sure is that he's got to stay low. He's got to fire low. He's got to, he's got to be able to shed blockers a little quicker so that they can't stand him up and win that leverage battle. So there's a little bit of work that he has to do. He's not an elite pass rusher, but he's got enough juice that I think he can play 3 downs eventually, not right away. You'd like to see him tackle a little bit better. It's funny. We talk about this with like cornerbacks and safeties a lot when they're thumpers instead of rappers. Yeah. You know what I mean? When they want to come and deliver a big hit. Yeah. Alfred Collins does that from the defensive line. He could be running right at a running back in the hole. And sometimes you just want him to just wrap him and take him down, and he tries to throw these forearm shivers. So that's just technical stuff that I think can easily get cleaned up. There's going to be a lot of teams that need guys like Alfred Collins, the Jets being one of them. When you talk about complementary alignment, like this next to Quinnen Williams would be ideal. This next to Ed Oliver in Buffalo would be ideal. This next to whatever other, there's tons of teams that need big defensive. Texans, the Texans need a big run stuffing interior defensive lineman. That would be ideal. Cincinnati needs one. He would be ideal. So there's a lot of fits for him. I expect Alfred Collins. I got a 3rd round grade on him, but I expect him to go higher. Like I said, you could easily see him on off the board towards the end of the 2nd round. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever. I'm not sure if I'm there on a 1st round grade on him. Like he's just not that elite of an athlete at his size to really garner that type of generate that type of hype from me. But again, a guy that at worst he's going to come in, like you said, Jeremy, and he's going to give you 2 solid downs right from the get-go and eventually work up into a 3-down player. Right.
And, we have the roster, with LT3 on the roster, we already have the guy who can come in those 3rd down situations. So, a lot of people say, I want a complete player. Obviously 1st round, you don't want to pick a guy in the 1st round you want a guy that's all 3-down player and is going to develop into that. So I understand why people would shy away from him. But if you see him come in at the 2nd round, or you see him come in at 73,
Yeah.
If he came in at 73, that's great value. I mean, like nobody should be upset about that, even if it means you see him coming out of the game in passing situations, because we have a guy and it's okay to be that kind of team. And why not have a fresh guy come in passing situations anyway? And LT3 is a guy I think a lot of us like, and we like the way he plays. So we want him to have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
And we saw that Quinnen does not need another Quinnen next to him. Like
Correct.
our defensive line was before last year, before we dissected it, was one of the best in the NFL. And it was when we had a couple of guys like Jefferson, that were just really good run stopping guys. And that was fine. So, people have to remember Alfred Collins could be a great complement to Quinnen Williams. And we even have a little depth with LT3. And like we were talking about, we haven't even, we might see a veteran come in on free agency. So
Correct.
Yeah.
So as we get into the top 6, because we're going into number 6 now, I will say that from this point forward, all these guys can be first round picks.
Okay.
I'm not saying they all will, but it would not surprise me if any of these guys made it into the first round. Again, we talk about the depth of this class. And from this point forward, they could all be first round picks.
Yeah, you're number 6. I hear a lot of people talking first rounds, late first round, second round pick. Would love to get him in the second round. I've even heard people say trade back and take this guy. So we're at number 6. You're number 6, and we're at somebody I already hear Jet fans pining for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Jet fans pine for him because one of the biggest Jet fans that does this kind of work in Connor Rogers has done nothing but wax poetic about him. As a matter of fact, in Connor Rogers' 2 consecutive mocks that he's done for the Jets, he's plugged this guy in with the second round pick, and that's Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. 6'3", 330 pounds, big guy, light on his feet, though. He moves really, really well for a guy that big. You talk about leverage and power. Tyleik Williams knows how to do it. You talk about true, like a real disciplined, true run defender first. Sturdy anchor. You can't move him off his spot once he gets there. Double teams, he eats him up. 2 gapping, not a problem for him. Sturdy anchor. He is your epitome of what, like, this is the there's one other guy that I would love to pair up next to Quinnen, but like there's not a lot of better pairs for the Jets scheme right here than there would be a Tyleik Williams. He isn't he's not the most explosive player. He doesn't play very sudden. His game is really, really done in a phone booth at the line of scrimmage, just eating up double team blocks, stacking and shedding guys, and being that force in both of those A gaps as a run defender. Everything else that you get is all the ancillary stuff, the pressures and all that stuff. That's all gravy. You're bringing a guy like Tyleik Williams in because you're saying, hey, I need somebody who's going to come in here and really help me get better at stopping the run. And that's exactly what Tyleik Williams is.
Yeah, I think we're already at a point, like with Tyleik Williams, at number 6, we're already at a point where 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this is when you clap and applaud and be happy as a Jet fan, right? We're getting to the level of, if this is second round, any of these guys, I mean, obviously some of them are not going to be there in the second round, but any of these 6, any of the 6, starting with Tyleik Williams, go with our second round pick, nobody should complain. I mean, I know it might depend a little bit on who our first round pick is and our needs and all that, but I'm saying as of right now in this moment, this is a very good pick at 42. If he was there, like we should be like, I don't think will be there, and if he is, we should be extremely grateful that he's there at 42 and grab him.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going to be in the discussion for sure at 42 if we move another way, in the first round.
Right.
So, because he's exactly what this defense needs. exactly what this defense
Right.
needs.
He's just a perfect fit for it. And I want to say really quickly, I want to thank Dano. He talked about it in the Danger Zone. Dano from Danger Zone. If you look at our backgrounds, that background is him. He sent that to me. Didn't even ask him. He just said, "Hey, I got something for you. What's your email?" And he sent this fantastic background. So shout out to him. I didn't get a chance to thank him for it on the show, and I want everyone to know that he is the one that did that. And in return, I'll plug the hell out of his channel. Subscribe to Danger Zone. Watch him every Friday night at 9 p.m.
As you should. It's a great show too.
It's a fantastic show. He gets the best guests, doesn't he? Though,
Yeah.
well, at least 2 weeks ago, and I'm so bad. Let's go to number 5.
Yeah, number 5 is that other Oregon defensive lineman that I talked about, and that's Derek Harmon. His film for me was a little hit or miss. But man, when it's a hit, it is good. Like, I mean, really good. At 6'4", 310 pounds, plays with a huge, like just a really, really good motor, like nonstop kid. He was a transfer from Michigan State. Kind of cut his teeth there. He did, he played okay as a sophomore, even better as a junior, and then transferred after the 23 season. He's tall, like I said, at about 6'4", 6'4.5", but he plays really low, which I think is beneficial for him. Again, another guy that plays with good gap integrity in the run. He's not a guy that's just going to blindly, like Michael Clemens style, just kind of try to go north and south. Like, he understands his role and his responsibilities. I think he's does that really good. When you talk about a defensive tackle that can also play defensive end in an odd front, but when you talk about like that stunt game and all those, the games that the defensive linemen play up front, like that's where he really stands out as the looper. If somebody comes down, he loops around them to kind of shoot up the A gap, or sometimes outside to the C gap. That's where he really excels. I think he does a good job as a mover. He showcases that really, really lightning quick feet at times. Really, really good balance. There's a lot to like in his game. He misses a little too many tackles. That's got to get better. It's not, he's got good get off. It's not great. His first step isn't great. And you got to see him, like there was times where he was completely just like washed out of games, because and sometimes, to his credit, the offensive line paid a lot more attention to him and kind of hit him with double team after double team. So there was, periods of games where he just disappeared, and he's lucky that they had a great defense behind him that could kind of pick it up. So that's the stuff, a little bit more consistency, a little bit of shedding, getting, splitting those double teams or really holding his ground more against those double teams, I think will make him better. But yeah, like the overall, the overall prospect, I don't even think has even come close to reaching the ceiling. Like this guy, I'm not comping him to him, but he could have a Chris Jones kind of elevation to his game where 3-4 years from now, you're talking about one of the top 2 best defensive tackles in the game. Like, I think that's what his upside really is.
Wow. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the trick between him and Tyleik is like I'm thinking that Harmon has, right. It's so funny because I was thinking has the higher ceiling because he can do more and have a bigger, like an even bigger impact.
Correct.
But at the same time, to be fair, has a lower floor.
Yes.
Like if he doesn't fix some of the things you're talking about, whereas Tyleik is all, I don't think has that floor. I don't think Tyleik Williams is a lot more predictable of at worst what he's going to be.
Correct.
But this guy has the ceiling.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's perfectly said, Jeremy. Tyleik Williams, the floor is going to be here, but the ceiling might not ever get to the level that Derek Harmon could get to. And on the same token, Derek Harmon could end up completely fizzling out if he doesn't fix, the some of the stuff that he needs to fix. He could be a guy that, has, one of those journeyman kind of careers where he bounces from team to team, just trying to hang on. So, the upside's, exponential, but, he's got to put it all together. But like I said, it's a lot of highs and lows on him, but the highs are so damn good. The
Yeah.
highs are so good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And having him at number 5 in this class is high praise for
Mhm.
sure. Without question.
yeah,
And now we get up to a guy. Now we get up to a guy that I know that could be the steal of the draft unless somebody else, is 32 teams. So there's never know what their scouting department, but I think he's the most underrated defensive tackle in the class by miles.
yeah,
By
yeah.
miles.
Yeah, and now we're getting into guy like this guy here is probably one of my 2 favorite prospects in the entire class. I'm not saying he graded out. He's my 30th ranked prospect. He's my, he didn't grade out the highest, but he's by far one of my top 2 favorites in the class. If you know me, if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen lots of tweets about him because I haven't stopped talking about him since October. That's Darius Alexander out of Toledo. Older prospect. Have to say that because he's going to be 25 by the time the season is, halfway through. So that could affect him. But man, when you talk about NFL ready, NFL caliber ready, this guy can come in and he could play and he could start from day one. Like the skill set that he has is so special and so unique. The way that he moves at 315 pounds, 6'3", with power and finesse. This is a guy that's not scheme, he's not scheme dependent. You've seen it on film. We've seen it live at the Senior Bowl. They lined him up everywhere. They lined him up at nose tackle. They lined him up on standing on 2 feet as a wide 9 rusher. And he couldn't be stopped. He's got the length at 34.5-inch arms and just such a good hand technician that he knows how to use that. He uses his hands better than any defensive tackle that I've ever scouted. And I mean that wholeheartedly, that I've ever scouted. He's got the most nuance in how he uses his hands. Now, he was recruited and he was a former offensive tackle that moved to the defensive side his freshman year. So he understands what the offensive tackles are doing.
Right.
He understands how to set them up and how to look like he's doing one thing and swipe and use those hands and rip through and get pressure at the quarterback. I've seen him at times, line up as a defensive end, as a wide 9 defensive end, loop all the way around to the middle and sack the quarterback. I've seen him do the opposite. I've seen him blow through the chest of guys, literally knock a guard 2 yards back off his feet on his ass straight into the quarterback. I've watched him drop back from the nose tackle position and drop back and play zone coverage in the hook zone, get an interception and score a touchdown against Pitt. Some of the things that he does is so good. Now, people are going to say, well, he played at Toledo. The competition wasn't that good. Yeah, the MAC is not the SEC, that's for sure. But then he lines up at the Senior Bowl, and he was utterly dominant. There was
and that's the key that has not let us down. And I know the 3 years you've been going, or 4 years, and the 2 years that I've been going, and from the first year, the one thing that does not let us down and does not lie is when they come into that Senior Bowl, they're repping against the best of the best. They're repping against the elite guys.
Yeah.
And that's when he erased that doubt, right?
Yeah.
To anybody who watched him during that week, I think a lot of people saw, oh, don't worry about the competition. This is just an extremely large, powerful, fast, athletic beast.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who the opponent's going to be. This is who he is.
And he's got the size, he's got the length, and more so, he's got the IQ and the intellect on how to use that to his advantage, right? Like
it would in no way shock me, Dom, if in 10 years, looking back at this draft, this is the best defensive tackle that comes out of this class. And he's a superstar. Like, it would not surprise me at all.
No, it wouldn't me either.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, like I said, probably my second favorite player in the entire class, right behind Miles Frazier. but a guy that would be my absolute dream pick for the Jets in the second round if we didn't go defensive line early in round one. This is the guy that I would hone in on and circle, and just because he can do so much. He can beat you with power, he can beat you with speed, he can beat you with finesse. He's a clogger in the sense that, like I said, those long arms and those reach, he can slow down runners that are even running by him. He can stack and shed. He sheds blocks like ridiculously quick. A very nuanced, very high level pass rush skill set that he has from the interior and from the outside. Just like a grade A player.
If we took this kid in the third round, I forget about fourth. I mean, like that would be ridiculous. But like if we took this kid in the third round, I might be as happy as I've ever been in a draft pick.
Yeah.
Like, no, really, like I will be doing freaking cartwheels. Like if he's on that board, I know that you as well, if he's still on the board when we get up on that podium in the third round and they say defensive tackle from Toledo, I will lose my shit.
I'll do that if they take him in the second round.
Right. I'll be right in the second round. I'll clap and say, wow, we got a great scouting department that doesn't get brainwashed by hype and media. And that's a great thing to know. But because of the value of the third round,
yeah,
like that kind of value to me would be JJ at 26. Like it would be so freaking amazing.
Yeah.
If they call his name, because I don't think he has a low floor. I think he has the high ceiling, and I think he has a really good floor of being just a solid defensive tackle in the NFL, worst case.
Yeah. Now, again, him turning 25 in November will affect, his draft pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams aren't going to want to spend a first round pick on a guy who's already 24. The previous regime didn't seem to care. They took Will McDonald, they took Jermaine Johnson, and it worked out well. But similar to those guys, more JJ than Will McDonald. There's no doubt in my mind that he can come in right away and he can start and he can play massive amounts of reps and really excel at them. It wouldn't surprise me whether or not he's the best defensive class lineman that comes out of this class. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if he has the best year one out of all these defensive tackles that we talked about. I think the transition for him from the college game to the program is not going to be as large as it is for some of these other guys, even some of these guys that are ranked ahead of him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love him. Part of me, there are parts of me that believe he's going to be the guy, that he's going to be the best of the bunch. And, part of me secretly hopes, man, I really hope that I don't care second or third. I really want this guy to be a Jet. I really want this guy to be a Jet. I'm right there with you. I love him. Number 3, I just want to say is going to be a surprise to some people. And I think that they're going to, people are going to be surprised to see him at 3. I think people would have guessed the order a little, not a lot of, I'm saying some people.
Yeah. You think this guy should be higher or lower?
I thought he was going to be higher. I thought he was going to be number 2.
Okay.
But not my number 2. I agree with this.
Yeah.
Because I agree with this only because of today. When you told me earlier in the day, I watched a full game of number 2.
Yeah.
And said, oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's why.
Now I love your number 2. I love your number 2. He's like my guy. I love him, and I'm ready to talk about him with you. I want you to I want you to give me your opinion on my take of him. Mm-hmm. But there's something I feel very special about him that I really love about him, that I think he's going to make us a better defense right off the bat with. But anyway, that's
Let's get in. Yeah, that's number 2. Let's get into number 3.
Who's our number 3?
Number 3 is Kenneth Grant out of Michigan.
And this is no slouch, by the way. I'm not going to cry if Kenneth Grant ends up. I've mocked this guy to the Jets so many times.
Yeah. Now, in that rare instance that the Jets trade down in round 1, and I call it rare, it's not, obviously they could trade down, and I really feel in my heart of hearts that's exactly what Muji wants to do, is trade down. It's just a matter of if somebody really wants to trade up. Well, and that only time will tell, because there's no real quarterbacks. But in a situation where you can trade down and you can trade down into the middle round one, even that, like that 17, 18, 19 spot, like this is the guy for me that I circle and say, yeah, this is the fit. Kenneth Grant, at 340 pounds, he's your one tech. He's a guy, that plays next to Quinnen. He is so strong and possesses so much power in his frame that, he can anchor, he can put you on his butt just with his hand shivers. He can redirect blockers. We talk about stacking and shedding, where he gets up into the guy, sees what's happened, and throws him and makes a play. Like, he does that with such ease and with such power and ferocity that come from his hands, and that just these tree trunks of legs. I'm not talking about legs. I mean, he's 340 pounds, big guy, but man, to quote Green Bean, if I will, like, he likes his offensive defensive lineman to have a lot of ass, right? Oh, and this guy's got it. He can really, really bear down and just hold his ground versus the run. He toys with offensive linemen with the power that he can generate from his hips and his hands. But he can move pretty well too. Kenneth Grant had he had a lot of stops. His win rate wasn't necessarily as high as some of these other guys that we're going to talk about, or that we have talked about. But for a guy this big, he shouldn't move as well as he does, and he does. He's really, really flexible. He's got good ankle flexion. He knows how to use his strong, powerful legs. He can do a lot in the stunt game as well, mainly as the pick to let the looper come around. He's a guy that can just maul through guys. There's going to be some questions with Kenneth Grant with those short little T-Rex arms. I think he measured in about 31 inches, which is not very long at all, especially for a defensive lineman. He can do a little bit better at times. He doesn't, he can move, but laterally he seems to be a little bit slow, so to me, that's why even though in college he played a little bit all over the place, but for me in the pros, I think he's going to be your one tech, right? Needs a little bit more polish. He's a little bit unrefined, uses strength a little too, like strength is good, but that's his really only go-to, and it wouldn't surprise me again. It wouldn't surprise me, frankly, if he was the first tackle taken off the board, defense tackle. And that's even with Mason Graham, who we're going to talk about. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if a team saw the upside and the size and the power profile of Kenneth Nolan and said, yeah, I need that. So, or Kenneth Grant, not Kenneth Nolan. Kenneth Grant. That's the guy that, like I said, in a trade back spot, we move. Somebody wants to come up and get Genty, and we want to move back to 13 or 14. You circle him and just call it a day, and he fixes a lot of problems on the defense.
Yeah, you watch him and he's so super solid, and you understand that Mason Graham takes a lot of attention off of him in your eyes, and it's very easy to get confused about which guy, people say, how can you say he's a better fit than Mason Graham? Well, for our team, for example, maybe not at the same pick as Mason Graham. Like you could argue that there's just more value in the player Mason Graham, and that's fine. I'm not going to argue with people over it. But if you tell me trade back and get him, or take Mason Graham at 7, but you get me another second round pick and him, or early third round pick and him, my argument is going to be he's the better fit, right?
Correct.
What we need. He is the better complement to what we need. So yeah, man, I mean, we're at the point where any of these guys wearing it, putting on a Jet helmet is going to be a good thing for us. Like,
yeah. And if it matters, I know that he did meet with the Jets at the Shrine Bowl. He chose to go to the Shrine Bowl. I can't tell you why. I don't know if he didn't get an invite to the Senior Bowl. I can't imagine that was the case. But he is, the Jets have shown some interest. They've met with a couple of big fatties. So it seems to me like you can start to write in pencil that that's going to be an area of need of the interior defensive line, kind of those run stuffing types. So,
do you have any concerns? Like if somebody was to say to you, as a concern, are you worried that we didn't get to see him against a lot of double teams because he was playing next to Mason Graham? And what would he have been if there was no Mason Graham and people would have double teamed him?
No, I'm not, because I think his game and his power profile shows in those situations. Like, listen, there's times where he wasn't always double teamed, but there's those dual blocks, on the inside zone and stuff where the guard comes down before he shifts off and peels off into the linebacker, where he's fighting through those at times. And like, he shows to me like that power profile is easily beatable in those situations. I'm not afraid of him getting double teamed. I'm not afraid of him getting washed out and blown down the line like we saw. Even Quinnen Williams. Like, listen, last year wasn't Quinnen's best season, and they saw that way too much. Just him getting washed out of plays by double team, so on and so forth. You don't expect that with a guy at 6'3", 340 pounds, Kenneth Grant, with his power and those tree trunks. So I'm not worried about that. Listen, I know it won't happen, but I got to tell you, I wouldn't be all that upset if he was a pick at 7.
Yeah, look, it's definitely not impossible in this draft for this year. Like I hope that if we can't trade down and he's the guy they want, I hope fans will understand. It's just the year. This particular draft is just simply not top heavy, and a guy that probably should go somewhere between 15 and 25 might go at 7.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
That's
But
right.
that's with Grant, guys from Michigan. If he ends up a Jet, rest assured we're getting a real player and we're getting a day one impact player.
Correct. So my number 2 that Jeremy was quietly,
Love him.
subliminally hyping up,
Love it.
Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss.
Can I say what I love about him?
Shoot.
Can I say what I love about him? My opinion of his size is that he's a tweener, because like he's not small or undersized, but he's also not a giant. But he looks like an athlete. Like he's built. He looks strong. Like looks like there's other NFL positions he could play. I said, wow, he looks more like maybe he'd be standing up as a because he's that fast. But he also has a thickness and a size to him. So he has the size, he has the speed. This is what I like about him. In stopping the run, you want a team that can stop the run. This is when he's in the game. This is what I saw. If you're the other team and you're the running back and you run away from him, every time they ran away from him, if that running back stops to change direction or hesitates, or if that running back tries to go back the other way, you're going to get leveled by this kid. He sheds he holds the block. The guy's blocking him, but he manipulates or he controls the movement and slides across the line. You mentioned the guy whose weakness was he wasn't lateral. Like, oh, that could be a weakness. In my opinion, this is the opposite. This is a guy who moves the blocking any direction he wants to move it. And anywhere on that field, sideline to sideline, could be the guy making the tackle. And we're talking about a defensive tackle. So I love what he brings to the running game. I love that. I love that he's a guy that I feel if the running back is not decisive and there's any kind of delay or pause, it's going to be very hard to stop this guy from being involved in the play. So anyway, that was my take on him.
Yeah. And you're right. Like I said, you talked a lot about the movement and the lateral stuff. There's probably no better defensive lineman in this class that moves the way Walter Nolan moves. He's as fast as an outside linebacker.
Yeah.
Although the overall athleticism, we never really got to see like that litmus test, because he actually in the he was a Senior Bowl invite and didn't come. He didn't test at the combine, didn't do any of that stuff. So I think like that to me is it was a little disappointing, not in the sense like I'm disappointed in the player, but I would have just liked to see him, compete and do all that stuff. That's definitely something I want to do. I think the best comp for him for his game is Ed Oliver, right?
Mm.
Both of them are a little bit smaller. They're not like the most the biggest. I think he's Ed Oliver with Hulk hands. That's the best way I can do it. Like he's got these haymakers. His overall athleticism, helps him win with speed and with leverage. And then he's just got these hands that just can punch a hole through a brick wall. That's what I love about him. He doesn't stop. I think Jeremy hit that point pretty hard on, spot on, is that he just doesn't stop. It doesn't matter if the play is opposite field and it's a pitch around the other end. That guy's going to take the angle and he's going to keep running, whether he gets there or not, And the crazy part is that he gets there a lot, So he's a guy that I could easily see having repeatable double-digit sacks just because half of them that he gets are going to be on sheer effort and heart alone.
Yeah, the South Carolina game.
Yes.
That was the game, man. I was like, oh my God. That was where I was like, geez, this kid is really good, really special. So
yeah, and you could play him all over the place, although, like, to me, he is a 4-3, a 4-3 defense, 3-tech defensive tackle, I think, through and through. That's where he's kind of best suited. Now, definitely unpolished. Definitely needs to work on his technique. Again, another one of those guys who, in college was one of the best on the field. So I think he's going to need, a good defensive coach to kind of fine tune some stuff in his game. The bigger thing with Walter Nolen, and I think it's fair to talk about because you might see him drop a little bit. He's a first round talent. He's a top of the, he's a top of the first half talent for me. He's number 11 in my class. But there's been some talks that he might not have, without knowing the kid, I don't want to talk bad about him, but there's some questions about how much he really loves the game of football, how much he really, is committed to honing his craft. They said when he transferred out of Texas A&M that Texas A&M couldn't have been happier to see him go. Yeah. So I guess there's some of that stuff that's kind of following around Walter Nolen. And again, I don't know any of it for certain because I don't know the kid or the player, or I didn't talk to anybody at Texas A&M, so I can't say anything with certainty. But there's some buzz around that. There's some people that are questioning, like, does he have it all above the shoulder pads? Because from the shoulders down, he's great. The heart is there. They question whether the passion for the sport is there. So, the worst thing in the world that we could see is him falling to like Buffalo or Philadelphia, because to me, that would be like the rich just getting richer.
Yeah. That would be just ridiculous. Yeah. Buffalo, don't scare me like that. But like, it's interesting because that's what when people ask why the interviews are important. This is why interviews are important, right? And it's like, and yeah, you have to even take that with a grain of salt because guys want to say the right thing. But if you're really good at it, you could see passion, right? You could see somebody who loves the game and that kind of thing. So. Definitely enough of a concern that, you wouldn't draft this kid if you didn't interview him. Like there has to be,
Yeah, he's going to, this is a guy that they're going to have long and hard, honest discussions in the war room about, because there are going to be some people that, that get, take his back and say, hey, like, we can, we need this talent. And there's going to be some that say, he doesn't have the head for, he's not going to be he's not a second contract guy. He's a little bit too, screwed in too loose, if you ask me. So
I think it's really funny. Harlan is just sitting there every tackle we talk about. He just says their name might be the best tackle in the draft. He's a funny guy. I love you, Harlan. Love you. Jacob, people are already talking about trade downs, things like that. We'll get to questions later if we have time.
Yeah.
We are almost at the time. I think everybody knows what's coming. It's interesting, Dom, because people, I think people misunderstand prospectors like you, guys like you, just like Joe Blewett was very misunderstood last year. I think that when people who watch players and watch them play and then comment and talk about them give their positives and they also give the cons or the negatives, that people get lost in the negative and think this guy doesn't like this player, or this guy, why isn't he down on this guy? And then you get this reputation for being down on the guy. And what people don't realize and don't think about is you're still ranking this guy number one in maybe the best class of my lifetime in this position. Like, it could be in the 2000s, the last 25 years. This could be the best defensive tackle class. And you got this guy ranked number one, but yet you have shown hesitation for this player in some respect. Now, I understand the perspective. You're talking about the perspective of number 7 pick.
Correct.
And I think a lot, and considering the amount of talent we just talked about that you can get later in the draft. But, that being said, he's your number one guy.
Yeah.
So I would just dispel some of that stuff.
Yeah.
About why you love this guy, and if there's anything I didn't cover in why you would have a hesitation at taking this guy at 7.
Yeah. Mason Graham obviously is number one. And like Jeremy said, he's my number 1 rated defensive tackle in this class. He's my number 8 overall prospect in this class. But yet I've earned somehow this moniker of Mason Graham hater, and that it couldn't be farther from the truth. Ooh, sorry, hang on one second. My computer just bugged out. Listen, I mean, there's a lot to like about Mason Graham, right? He's got a lot of the same similar skill sets of some of the guys that we talked about. He's probably, if you took some of the best traits from, Josh Farmer and Aeneas Peebles and Derek Carmen and Darius Alexander, and put them all into one, I think you probably come up with Mason Graham, right? And again, there's no denying at 20, he'll be 22 at the time of the draft. He has really, really kind of cemented himself to me as a top, at worst, a top 7 pick. And I say it like this because I think if he's on the board when the Jets pick, that he's going to be the pick. I really, in my heart of hearts, I really think that. I don't see them passing on Mason Graham. Would I do it? No. And there's reason to it. Let's talk about the player first. You talk about ability to penetrate from the interior. That's exactly what Mason Graham can do. For a guy now, he tested in really, really light, sub 300 pounds, which doesn't bode well for him. However, a lot of guys get skinny and get light for the combine because they want to be at their fastest and their quickest and their most agile. And it's easier to do when you're lighter. So I think his playing weight is probably more about 305, 310 pounds, which is fine. He ended up not running or doing anything at the combine because he injured himself getting ready for it, to tweak the hammy or something like that. But you talk about the ability to penetrate. You talk about the understanding of how to use his body and leverage. You talk about the versatility. Another guy who can play up and down the defensive line. Doesn't matter. He's played tons of snaps as a hand in his dirt defensive end. He's played, even though 3 tech is really where he's going to settle, but he's played all up and down. He's played outside linebacker for Michigan, at 300 pounds. He played outside linebacker in certain sets and certain schemes. I think he's, that versatility really helps because I think his game is really versatile. Although, for me, I think how he can affect and press the pocket from the inside is really his strong point. He's a good run defender. He's not bad. He's not the greatest. He's not, Tyreek Williams, and he's not Kenneth Grant at stopping the run. He definitely is a guy who's going to have to learn how to really defend or really break through and really split double teams a little bit more. He's, a lot of technical stuff that needs to to kind of be tuned up or tuned in with him too, from his stance to help him get even more explosive. He can add some, some pass rush stuff, but again, that's probably just nitpicking. For me, I see Mason Graham as a really safe pick.
Mhm.
I think he's a very, very safe pick. I think when you talk about high floor, I think exactly what you're going to get in Mason Graham. Like he's not there. I think the bust rate is really, really small on Mason Graham. So, and that's why I think if the Jets are on the board at 7, they'll take him. I don't know where the fit is next to Quinnen Williams. I'm just going to be flat out honest with you. I know other people and other content guys will tell you that's not the case. I'll line him up next to Quinnen Williams at all time. Blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. They're that good. Yeah, I'm not denying that. But neither of those guys, he is a Quinnen Williams clone in regards to his skill set and stuff like that. So I don't know where that fit is, because neither of them are going to want to play inside and have to 2 gap or split the double teams. As a matter of fact, both of them probably could use a little improvement in their anchors against good run blocking offensive linemen. I think that's where they both struggle. They're not like, they don't have the quickness. So even though they're quick, they don't have the quickness of, say, an Anais Pables or Kalijah Kancey or something like that, where they're going to beat you with every get off every time. You know what I mean? So to me, this is a not the perfect complement to Quinnen Williams. I think he's a supplement to Quinnen Williams. Like, you want to take him and you want to play Quinnen and then give him a rest, and you can pop Mason Graham, and the drop off ain't going to be all that much like it was last year to Solly Thomas or something like that.
Yeah,
But
I it's funny you're saying all this, because I think Mason Graham is a guy. If you take a Mason Graham, maybe we're trading Q. Like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's just a bad allocation of resources, like, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I think that you can't use your number 7 pick, especially in a class this good that has Dorian Alexander, right? And use the pick on Mason Graham, and then leave this huge question mark about our run defense and say, we're going to just go with 2 guys, and neither of them complement each other in who's the guy that's really going to be that wall, that stone wall against the run. And the fact that, yeah, they might be really good disruptors in passing situations, and they might do some really fun, cool things, and they're really both 2 talented guys on the field together. But if we're giving up 150 to 200 yards a game rushing, like, I'm not going to be happy, especially because we spent such a valuable resource on a defensive tackle. When you have these guys that are clearly better complements, and people, it's not only, you can't only go by who's the better player. You got to say who's the better fit.
Yeah.
And, but I agree with you, like, that he should be ranked number 1. He's the number 1 guy. Yeah. And he's, no matter what, he's going to be a really good player for us.
Yeah. And listen, truth be told, Jeremy, is I don't even think he's going to reach 7. I don't. I think that, because there's teams that need that type of guy. And if he was the pick for the Jets, like I said, I wouldn't be upset, because he's awesome. 63 pressures and 58 stops the past 2 years.
Right.
From the inside. You really can't, you can't knock that.
It would be really fun to watch our defensive line go after a quarterback on 3rd and 12.
Yeah, like I said, my biggest thing with him is, 1, the length is going to be real. The length issues are gonna play in. And 2, it's really, how do you fit him next to Quinnen Williams? Like, you got to really explain this and show me how that is going to work with both of them on the field. Again, because this isn't going to be the same defense as it was with Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, where the front 4 were the ones that were expecting at all times to get the pressure on the quarterback. There's going to be a lot of different things. You're gonna ask a lot more 2 gap responsibilities and gap consciousness in the run game and in the pass. There's going to be times where where Steve Wilks doesn't even want his defensive linemen really pressing the pocket forward. He wants them to just kind of stay home and anchor and take up bodies, so that the blitzer that he has coming off the end, the 2 blitzers, the linebacker and the cornerback that are crashing in, can get there scot-free, untouched.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
if you had them, I think if Jeff Ulbrich was here last year, I could see him lining up the two of them and saying, we're going to figure out the run, but you know what? These two guys from the inside is going to be dangerous. They'll get to the quarterback all the time. They'll be game wreckers, and I think there's going to be a lot of times when Mason Graham can be a game wrecker. But to me, I think I think he's like a B+ student all the way across the board, which is great, which has an all-pro upside. I don't know if it's a lock consistent year in, year out that he's going to be the top 3 tackle in the league, but it wouldn't surprise me if he does that. But when you talk about the fit, when you talk about the money that we've already invested in a guy who plays the same position to me, it's just not the best allocation of resources. So that's my only complaint with Mason Graham to the Jets in round 1.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. If it wasn't a strong draft class for defensive tackle, I would say, okay, I'll live with, like, they'll figure it out with the run. But for just knowing who the defensive tackles that'll be available in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, and just knowing the talent, in the position, I just think, like, the resource-wise, when you allocate your resources, we can be a better team with a different pick at 7 and then getting one of those other guys in the 2nd or 3rd round. And I think that would make us overall a better football team. Nothing against Mason Graham. It's as a player. It's just about, our needs, what we, the fact that we can fill that defensive tackle spot with, when Jefferson was there with Quinnen, we had a top 5 NFL defensive line in the NFL 2 years ago. So it was proof that you don't need another Quinnen. You just need a guy who complements Quinnen well, so, along with obviously maybe an edge that's, that's JJ and didn't get hurt. And you gave away JFM and couldn't seal the edge. So, there's other factors to our run defense as well. But I, at least on the inside, like what we used to have. I like having that run stopping guy that you can, and like you said, I think changing up the scheme and doing what this guy wants to do, if we're doing a lot of just absorb and eat the blocks and let the guy blitz on all those plays, every play, you're going to shake your head on all those plays and says, what a horrible waste of resource. Like that we're having Quinnen Williams and Mason Graham, 2 number 1 picks, top 10 picks, absorbing tackles as their role. That would be hard to swallow. Dane has a question about linebackers. Now that we signed Sherwood, do we need to draft a heavy linebacker that we can pepper in? I love that he says pepper in. Dano loves to do, his work in the kitchen when he adds pepper to things.
Yeah, it's a fair point, Dano. Listen, at 220 pounds, Sherwood's not that physical specimen that he's not your old school type linebacker. He's very much your more modern day Mike linebacker. Works more. He does a good job. He's a great tackler. But he works more sideline to sideline than he does, in that phone booth. So, yes, I think that's exactly what they'll probably do. Is they'll probably look to draft somebody that's more in the 230 to 240 pound range. Again, who knows what's going to happen with Quincy Williams? Who knows if he gets extended? Who knows if he holds out? All that stuff. But, if you assume that the Jets are going to move on from Quincy next year, you could just slide Jamien Sherwood over to that spot. And bring in, have a more beefier, true run defender first before athlete type of linebacker in the pipeline, getting ready to go. Name to keep an eye on for the Jets in that role, Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina. 6'2", 245 pounds, true, run stopper first type of linebacker.
Where would he come from as far as rounds? Where would we go?
He's an older prospect. He's a 6th-year senior, again, a 25-year-old. Talent-wise, I think he's a 2nd-round guy, but more likely probably 3rd or 4th round.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Jake has a question. I'm assuming he's talking about
Jihad.
Jihad. I would hope He's talking about Jihad Campbell.
Man, you know what, Jake, that's a tough question because these two guys are so good. You find me hard pressed to not choose Jihad Campbell over just about anybody in this class. He's right up there with Darius Alexander as one of my favorite prospects. I think Jihad Campbell will be the better pro. Right here, right now in 2025, I think Grant's the better fit. Does that make sense? That makes sense, right?
Yeah. I think definitely. I think definitely. I mean, but wouldn't cry if they went the other direction. Like if they.
Well, a lot of Jets fans will, considering they're already crying that you're paying Quincy $6 million and Sherwood $15 and CJ Mosley $18. Too much money spent. Too much money spent in the linebacker room.
Too much resource in the linebacker room, but you got to look at the future. I mean, Mosley's on his way out last year, probably for sure, right?
Mhm.
You have to look at the situation, I think that again because of the depth of the defensive tackle position, I don't want either position. I think there's other things we should be focused on, but you can't control the year, you can't control the talent that's there. So I think if you can't trade back, even though you're just going to take a great football player and that's it, and maybe because the defensive tackle class is so deep, if you were to end up taking Mason Graham or trading back and taking Grant, then later on in the draft, maybe in the 5th round, you're going to get a steal. Maybe Peebles is there, and maybe you just deepen the room, and that's how it might go down.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, my friend. Excuse me.
So and that goes to what he was saying. He was asking you who's a better, who do you think is the better fit? And I think you made that very clear that Grant is the better fit.
Yeah, I think Campbell will be the better player. I think Campbell will have the better career. I think Campbell will be the better pro. But right here, right now, for what the Jets need, I think Grant is the better fit.
Yeah, when Quinnen Williams was tweeting, before Aaron Glenn addressed it, I said, look, if this becomes a problem, he's going to be a candidate. Like if he comes in with an attitude, or if he makes a trade request or anything like that, then everything changes in my opinion of Mason Graham. Right, everything is completely different. If you're suddenly trading Q for picks, then all of a sudden Mason Graham at 7 seems like a really great idea. And then even, possibly, unless we pick one up in free agency, maybe even grabbing a guy in the 3rd round and getting one of these top 10 guys we're talking about. Like suddenly you have to rebuild your whole interior defensive line if you trade Quinnen, and Mason Graham makes a whole bunch of sense. Yeah. But if Quinnen's going to stay, it changes everything, right? It changes everything.
Yeah, I don't see them moving on from Quinnen, however.
No, I don't think it'll happen, and I don't think we'll get a lot for him because of his salary. I don't know that. I think people think we fetch this big haul for Quinnen Williams, but the salary is already the cost for a player like that. And when you have a deep draft like this and you have enough tackles, the market it's not a scarce commodity in the market. So. Yeah. How much are people going to give for a guy who's already making $24-25 million a year?
Yep.
And who may have seen his best years? I have some concerns. Not that he's going to be bad, but I think we may have seen his peak. I don't know if Quinnen Williams will ever be better than he was 2 years ago.
A lot of people say that he got paid and then it just moving on.
Yep.
So,
but anyhow, I think we're ready to call it a night.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody in the chat. Jake, Jets Mess, you guys came on a little later. Harlan, you guys came a little bit later into the conversation. Billy SBC, thanks for jumping in. I thanked most of the other guys earlier. Everybody that's not in the chat that watches the replays, we appreciate all the support. We appreciate if you hit the like button. That really helps us out. So if you like it, I'm not telling you to hit the like button just as a favor. I'm saying if you like it, hit the like button. Hopefully, I think that's a reasonable thing for us to ask. And looking forward already to next week. I want to wish everybody a great week. Dom, obviously, will be talking throughout the week, but if I don't talk to you directly, have a great week as well.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
All right. So we will leave you with, do I still have it here? Let's see if I still have it here. Here we go.
A positional group like the tight end group, this is the draft class to do it. It is very deep.
I'm with Green Bean. I mean, to me, the tight ends that you want to have on a team, it's always nice if you can get the guy that does it all.
I think it's going to be a functional part of the offense. You better get somebody in there that can play, or get a couple guys that do something, extraordinarily well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dom C here with the Talking Jets Network. I'm lucky enough to grab tight end from Georgia Tech, Jackson Hollis. Jackson, how's it feel to be back on the field, my brother?
It's great, man. You know, right when we were getting on that bus, I was just excited.
And that's Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. Now, he didn't say anything. He continued and did all the drills on an ankle. Another guy with under a 4% drop rate throughout his collegiate career.
Jets Network were able to get a hold of Terrence Ferguson, tight end, Oregon. Dude, great practice so far. How's it feel to be back on the field?
Oh, man, it feels good to be out here. I love competing. There's a lot of great players out here, so go against them.
Meet our friend Harold Fannin.
See, here with the Talking Jets Network, lucky to grab Bowling Green tight end Harold Fannin Jr. Harold,
Former college quarterback. He's thrown, he's got touchdown passes in his career. He matches movements and he matches, he's got quick feet. Like I said, he's another guy who's got a nose for the ball, turns the ball over all the time. Again, another smooth mover, clicks and closes.